Welcome everyone as you start joining us. We'll just wait for probably just a minute or so. We've got a lot of people who've registered for today's session, so we'll just give everyone some time to get themselves logged on and into the session. We do have a really packed session today, so we won't hang around for too long. We'll get started very shortly. Everyone to make sure that they're on mute as they join us. Got over about 170 people registered for today, so keep you on mute. We'll make sure that we've all got a really smooth session. All right, I reckon we might get started just so that we can get through everything today. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the lands of the Kaurna people, or I'm coming to you from the lands of the Kaurna people. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands where you join us from and the First Nations people participating in this session. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of First Nation peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of South Australia. And I'd also like to extend my respects to First Nations people who are joining us for this session this morning. Now, bear with me, I'm just going to flip across. So welcome everyone. My name's Linda. I'm the Policy and Programs Manager at TIC SA. TIC is really pleased to be hosting this information session on the recently announced Experience Nature Tourism Fund. And we're joined this morning by people from SATC who will be administering the fund. This $2 million injection by the government over the next 4 years into supporting experiences that connect visitors to South Australia's iconic nature is welcomed and practical assistance for our industry, especially as you all continue to rebuild from the impact of the last couple of years. And I think the fact that we've got so many people joining us today is real evidence of the appetite that there is for improving and developing new experiences across South Australia's tourism industry. Our session today is focused on providing further information about the grants program and providing some advice that will assist you all to develop strong applications for funding. You'll see up on the screen our agenda for today's session. And we've got a full hour of information ahead. I will aim to run a tight ship so that we can allow enough time for questions at the end and still finish by 11:30. First off, we're going to just get a little bit of a delve into the grants program with the SATC and just talk through those guidelines a little bit more in detail. Then we're joined by Chris from National Parks or DEW, who just talk about the requirements if you're looking at doing experiences in parks. And then we've also got Susan Lee from Clear Vision Consulting joining us, and she's going to give some really great tips on how you can put in a strong application. Please keep your microphone on mute. As I've said, we'll be welcoming questions at the end. You can enter them via the chat function. And so if we don't get to them during the question and answer session, then we'll follow up with you post-webinar. And just to let you all know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available for you to go back and review at your leisure following today's session. So we're just going to get straight into it. And first up, I'm going to introduce Nick Jones from the Tourism Commission. He's the Executive Director of Destination Development, and Nick's just going to provide an introduction to this new grants program. So over to you, Nick.
Thanks very much, Linda. Everyone hear me all right? Nod? Yep, all good. Yeah, look, thank you. Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Tixa, for the opportunity organising this today, the opportunity to talk about the fund and give, I suppose, some early detail on the Experience Nature Tourism Fund to allow people time if they're going to submit some time to put their applications together. And thanks to all of you operators too, one for attending today, but everything that you've been doing over the last couple of years, particularly during such challenging times. I think if we're excited about this fund, this $2 million, that is focused on activating tourism experiences near or within national parks. We also had another fund, the Tourism Industry Development Fund, which focused more on the sort of those larger projects like refurbished accommodation, new accommodation. This Experience Tourism Nature Fund is more about activating those natural assets that we have in creating great tourism experiences out in nature. And it's timely in that you look at the demand and how things have shifted, particularly around regions and people's wants and needs out of their holidays. Pre-COVID, regions delivered 44% of tourism expenditures to South Australia. As we come out of COVID, that's moved to 57%. So people are wanting to get out, see the regions, experience. They want those open spaces, fresh air, you know, the great food and wine, and obviously the wildlife that we have in abundance in South Australia. We want to, via this fund, activate some more experiences to assist you operators to activate some more experiences and allow us the content then to market those not only domestically and internationally as we as those markets open up again. So I'll now going to hand over to Chelsea Clack, the Manager of Infrastructure and Investment at the SATC, to give some more detail on the fund. Look, it's a really good opportunity. Ask questions today. If we don't get them to them all, I'm sure we will come back to you on things. And I'd also just like to acknowledge and say thanks to the team from Department of Environment and Water as well, who's been a key partner in this fund. So I'll now hand over to back to Linda, and she'll hand that to Chelsea. But thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Nick. So I'm going to hand straight over to Chelsea, who's the Manager of Infrastructure and Investment. And Chelsea's probably going to be, she might kick me for saying this, but your best friend as you go through this grants application process, because she's the guru and the person who knows so much about it. So over to you, Chelsea.
Thanks, Linda. Just checking everyone can hear me. I've got some nods, so that's great. So thank you. As Nick and Linda mentioned, I am part of the team that is managing the Experience Nature Tourism Fund. So today I just wanted to provide you with some further details around eligible locations, some types of projects that are eligible, the difference of streams, approval processes, and the panel assessment and timeframe. So apologies, I've got a lot of information to cover, so hopefully you can kind of follow along. So First of all, the purpose of the Experience Nature Tourism Fund is to support tourism projects which create nature-based tourism experiences that enhance the visitor experience and encourage visitors to enjoy and learn about South Australian national parks. That's probably the key thing to remember, is that it needs to activate, projects need to activate national parks. So I'll go for, you'll see in my presentation, there's a lot about how to kind of draw it back to the park. So this funding program is a $2 million pool of funding. It will run for 4 years, and there's $500,000 allocated to each financial year. So it's really key to remember, because there are some key grant criteria that if you don't meet this year, you can apply for the program next year. So applications will be assessed competitively by an assessment panel. So everyone will be applying all together and it's assessed all together. So eligibility. So there's 2 ways you can be eligible to apply for the ENTF. So the first one is to be within 20 kilometres of a national park under the care and control of National Parks and Wildlife Service. The second one is to either to operate an experience that actually enters the national park. There is on our webpage, so the tourism.sa.gov.au website, there is a webpage dedicated to the NTF and which includes our program guidelines. Within the program guidelines, there is a definition of national parks, which is on the screen here as well, which you can kind of find a bit more information if the park that you're located to is a national park under the care of National Parks and Wildlife. So second one is, if your project is located within 20 kilometres of a park and it's land that you do not own, you'll need to ensure you have all necessary approvals to operate or build that project on the land. For example, if you're leasing the land, so if you're located 20 kilometres there and you're leasing the land, ensure you include all approvals from your landlords. Also, if you're operating a project on government land but not requiring a lease, you will need to contact that relevant department. So, for example, SA Water, if you're operating on their land. We've had some questions about other areas with natural assets in them. Projects in these locations could be eligible provided they're within 20 kilometres of a national park and they're activating that national park. But just remember, that's the key thing. How is your project activating it? It should also be noted that applications to develop fixed infrastructure, which requires a new lease in national parks, are not eligible. So now I move on to project categories. So there are 6 categories of project types that are eligible to apply for funding, and you can apply for a mixture of them all. So we have product development and product and experience development, which could include tourism distribution and pricing. Fixed infrastructure, that's if it's not in a national park, so which could include accommodation refurbishments, maybe new toilets, things like that. Equipment to support the delivery of an experience, which could include snorkeling or kayaking equipment. Vehicles, which is pretty self-explanatory, but there's a variety of vehicles noted in the guidelines that could give you some examples of what could be included. Training, so this includes driver training, tour guide training, and then finally marketing, which could include website and content creation. There's a lot of examples in the guidelines, so if you want to have a look, you'll have the 6 main categories, and then they'll kind of go into a bit more detail on the second column. So as I mentioned, you can apply for a mixture of all the project categories if they're all, if it's part of one project, if that makes sense. So you would see there's also, move on to the difference in the streams. So there are 2 categories. All applications, regardless of what stream they're in, will be assessed the same and against the same eligibility and assessment criteria. So the main difference between these 2 streams is that how the payments are administered and their completion timeframes. So stream 1, this is grants up to $20,000. These grant payments are generally made up front. So if you're approved, you can issue an invoice and we'll pay the funding up front, and the project must be completed by mid next year, so 30 June 2023. Invoices will be still required to be submitted after the project's completed, and any unused funds will need to be paid back. Stream 2 is anything over $20,000 up to that $50,000 mark. That's a grant payment after project completion. So once again, it's how you supply all your third-party invoices and your claim form, and then we'll pay you after the project completion, and projects must be completed by the 31st of December next year. Payments for both streams will only be made if you have your CTO, so your tour operator license or your marine park permits, if that has been issued by due, if that's required. Okay, so projects and grant claims can be completed earlier than those timeframes, just not later. Okay, so I've kind of given you, if you've got two breakdowns of the two project locations here. So all projects must be what we call shovel ready and have all necessary approvals to commence their build and to operate. So I'll first of all go through if you're operating into a national park. So if you're operating into national park, there's a lot of web information on our webpage, which will go through the park management plans and where you can find out whether your activity is permitted within that national park. If you think, yes, I'm good, I've checked it all and I can operate, then you will need to apply for your in-principle support from the Department of Environment and Water. This is an online application form on that web page. So you just kind of click it, go through the form, and that will go through to my colleagues at due. If that's all received, then you can apply via the online application form. And then if you're approved for grant funding, then you'll need to apply for your CTO or marine parks permit. So my colleague Chris will go through the in-principle support process in more detail next for you. So the second one is if you're located within 20 kilometres of a national park, it's through the standard kind of approval process. So you need to have all necessary approvals to operate and build. So that's obtaining whether it might be development approval or it could be your landlord approval to operate, license to occupiers, etc. So all of that information will need to be supplied with your application to say that you have got your approvals to operate. So once you have this, you can apply via the online application form, and remember to include all your evidence of approvals. Cool. So that's about processes. Now, applications for the fund will open at 9 AM on the 5th of September, so in about a week and a half. The link to the online form, I also include a PDF template with the questions so you can have an idea of what will be asked throughout the form. There will also be the agreement terms of the grant agreement located onto that page as well, so you can review those. Now, so to access the online form, there's a link and you'll need to create a login, and the form will save as you go once you've pressed saved and next. So you can kind of log in, do a bit, and then come back. Just make sure if you're on one page, it won't save that until you press the next. All this information will still be included on the online form, so you can kind of jog your memory when you're applying. It'll work on most browsers, just not Internet Explorer, so just remember that one. And please note that any character limits also include spaces. Log in as the person filling out the form. So if for any reason you're completing the form on behalf of someone, you can enter the applicant's details on page 2. And the last thing to remember would be if you've applied for the Regional Event Fund or worked with Tasting Australia, or basically anything in recent times with SATC on this portal, you should have a login. And if you've forgotten your password, you can just go forgot your password. If you can't remember, if you're having difficulty, just email me at the satc.ntf email address and we'll reset it for you. So it's really vital to view that PDF template before commencing so you can see all the information that is required. The grant terms will be available, and to apply for funding through the NTF, you'll need to accept these terms, and if successful, this will in turn become your grant agreement. So please ensure all details in your application are as up to date and as accurate as possible. And if you're successful, this information will generate into your agreement. Probably another key thing to remember is once you have submitted, you're unable to add anything and there's no opportunity for us to go back and ask for information. So please make sure that you go through the review page and ensure you've attached everything you want to and answered all the necessary questions. Okay, so all eligible applications will be assessed competitively against an assessment criteria by an assessment panel. So make sure you read this assessment criteria carefully, which is located on page 7 of the program guidelines. To give yourself the best chance of receiving grant funding, some points to think about are, think about the national park and how your proposed project will encourage visitation to the park or connect that visitor with the park. Is your project innovative? How will your project increase visitation? Is it as easy as more bikes equal more visitor capacity? Or is it how will your website encourage more visitation? How will your project be sustainable? Does your project deliver outcomes for the community as well as visitors? Will it educate visitors about conservation? Does it align with the regional response priorities in the regional visitor strategy? Have you spoken to your regional tourism manager? They're key personnel in your region that can provide some insight also. How does your project retain employment in your business, or will you need to employ someone new to operate the project? What about temporary employment? Have you planned your project including budget, timeframes, and identified any risks? Or have you delivered a project like this before? They're just some key questions to kind of prompt you thinking when you are filling out that form to cover all the assessment criteria. So make sure you've covered this all and included all necessary information and attachments. Okay, I'll move through to timeframes for the funding. So as I mentioned, applications are open in a week and a half on the 5th of September, and they are open for 7 weeks, closing 21st of October, and no late applications will be accepted. I'll mention that if you are operating to parks and you need that in principle support, those applications are open now. So you can go through apply to June now. So you've got as much time as possible because you will need that approval to apply for the funding. So once applications close, all eligible applications will undergo a check and review and a financial review prior to assessment by the assessment panel, which will occur in November. We're aiming to advise all applicants of their outcome of their application in early December. Okay, so some key areas to go for if you want to know more or find out more about your project. We'll firstly go to our webpage, which is held on the corporate website. It includes a comprehensive frequently asked questions document, the program guidelines, and that information about the in-principle support through due. As I mentioned earlier, contact your regional tourism manager. They are key in your region to provide some insight. I know they will be consulted during this process, so yeah, have a chat with them earlier than later. We've also got a tab on our corporate website, tools and resources, which may be of assistance as well. And then you've got your 2 contact email addresses. One's for us at SATC and one's for Due. Okay, so my key takeouts for today: plan ahead. Make sure you have enough time to apply for in-principle support and then complete the grant application for. Start obtaining your quotations, collating your approvals. Think about your timelines, your project risks. Have you got the necessary minimum 20% co-contribution? So start doing that planning now and get in early with that in-principle support. Engage with the RTM. They may be able to assist you with points you haven't thought about. Make sure you include everything you have in your application. Once you submit, you can't include anything more. Everything that's in your application will be assessed. So just make sure if we're missing something, we don't know about that. So if you're unable to obtain all the approvals or meet the eligibility criteria, just remember we're running it again next financial year. So you've got a bit of time to put together next financial year's application. And lastly, really think about how your project activates or encourages visitation to the national park that you're proposing your project is located near or that you're entering in. So thanks everyone for your questions as well earlier. If you need further clarification on any that we go through, please feel free to email me at satc.entf@sa.gov.au. All the email addresses are on our website as well. But yeah, please feel free to email me at any time. So I'll pass back to Linda.
Thanks so much, Chelsea. Now I'm going to hand over to Chris Thomas, joining us from the tourism team within the Parks branch or division of DEW. Just if you get a bit confused about Parks and DEW, it's all the one department. And Chris is just going to talk you through just some of the things you need to be cognizant of when it comes to operating within a national park. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Linda, and great to have everyone online today. It's a great turnout, and it's great to be partnering with the Tourism Commission and the Tourism Industry Council again, rolling out a suite of grants to activate tourism around our nature and natural places. Chelsea's covered a bit of this, but I thought I might just delve into a bit more detail because I'm sure there are lots of questions about national parks and the definition, and maybe we could start with the definition there because there is some confusion. We have about 350 national parks and reserves in South Australia under the National Parks Act. They are different to the wilderness protection areas. We have 14 wilderness protection areas under the Wilderness Protection Act, and we have 19 marine parks under the Marine Parks Act. So broadly, these are all called protected areas, and they're managed under legislation, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service takes care of those parks on your behalf. So we do have defined areas. All of those locations are listed on our website. So if you're not sure if the piece of nature that you're interested in activating is within one of those areas, jump on our website and you should be able to find the information about the parks. So really, as Chelsea's mentioned, it's a prerequisite that you get in principle support from the National Park Service if you want to activate activity in a national park. And the reason for that is we don't want you to spend a lot of time writing an application, getting funding, and then find out that you aren't going to get an approval down the track. So it's really about trying to be on the front foot, ask your questions up front, let us give you in principle support for what it is you're trying to do before you apply. And that way, once the money is issued to you, if you are successful, it should be a pretty straightforward process to get the approvals. What we've committed to as part of this, obviously, it's a fairly tight process. It's a short 7-week window to apply. It's got a competitive process, so we've committed to turn around those in principle supports within 10 days. That's assuming you provide us with all the information we need. So in some cases, we'll turn it around quicker than that if it's pretty straightforward, but we basically give a guarantee that 10-day turnaround so that you can then put your application together for the fund and have the best chance at getting funding. Obviously, if you've got questions about national parks and you've tried the Tourism Commission's contact, please feel free to contact the National Park Service ourselves in the tourism team. Our email address is on the screen there, dewtourism@sa.gov.au. Click us through an inquiry. If you're not sure or the information is not on our website or you can't find the relevant plan of management, we'll point you in the right direction. Thanks, Linda. Now, the other point is you don't have to be licensed to operate in the park when you apply for the fund. What you need, though, is that in principle support. If you are successful in getting the funding under the fund, then you can come back to us and say, thanks for your in principle support. I now have approval for the funding. Can I now please apply for the license to operate in that park to do the activity I want to do? So we didn't want you to have to sweat on getting a licensed approval before applying. We thought it's quite simple. We can do that after the fact, assuming you've got that in principle support. Many activities that the tourism industry undertake are pretty much as of right in our national parks. So you're thinking about guided tours, general CTO operations, whether it be interpretive walks, all these things are generally broadly accepted in our parks and should be readily approved. And we would expect to provide in principle support fairly simply. There are, of course, some parks where some activities might be a bit more sensitive. So yeah, think about the park you want to operate in. Please look at the park management plan, because the park management plan basically says what we can and can't approve. So if you're not sure, check the park management plan. And yeah, any queries you have, please again contact us at that dewtourism.sa.gov.au email address, and we'll respond to you as quickly as we can. The other thing we'd really encourage you to do, it's not mandatory, but we really encourage you to engage with our partners early. So if you are thinking of going to a particular national park and there is a local friends group or conservation group who do a lot of volunteer activity, we would really encourage you to contact them before you apply, just to sound out your idea, to check that they're not going to be resistant or opposed to what you're proposing. They can be your best friends, but they can also be challenging if they're not supportive of what you're doing. So I'd encourage you to talk to the local friends group if there is one, or local progress association, or anyone who's got a stake in that park, who's active doing volunteer work. And also, very importantly, we have traditional owners across vast amounts of our national parks and co-managed parks. So think about whether your park is either a co-managed park or has a local traditional owner group that has an active interest in that park, and do think about consulting with those traditional owners before you apply. Sometimes it could save you a lot of time if actually you get their sort of in principle support before you apply, or if they're completely opposed, it would be good to know that before you apply, because that could affect your approvals. Again, if you're not sure who to contact, get in touch with us. We've got a list of friends of park groups on our website. We can put you in touch with the relevant contact person in that friends group to have that early conversation, so that you can get your project off on the right foot. Next one, please. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. Oh, that's it. Simple. There you go. So yeah, so Chelsea covered a lot of ground. I mean, maybe the take-home message for me is, please contact us early for your in-principle support. Fill out the online form. We'll turn that around in 10 days. We really want to partner with industry here. We've had 2 previous grant programs, which I'm sure you're aware of. Our Nature-Based Tourism Co-Investment Fund, which was the bigger fund we've had over the last 2 years. And then the small business grants for nature-based tourism week that finished on the 30th of June. So it's great that we've now got another fund opening for the tourism industry to really activate nature and parks. Again, there's plenty of questions in the chat down the side I see there, so I'm more than happy. Some of those are about parks, so I'm happy to respond to those after and circulate those if that's appropriate, Linda. But yeah, don't be shy. If you do have questions, fire away. We'd much rather you had all the information up front and no doubts as you apply for your funding. Best of luck with it. We wish you all the best. Thanks, Linda.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris. As Chris has indicated, there's actually quite a number of questions coming through on the chat, and obviously do have time at the end to respond to those questions. So we will get to them, but certainly we'll be following up with Chris and his team and Chelsea as well, following this if we don't get through them. I'd now like to hand over to Susan Lee. Susan Lee joins us from Clear Vision Consulting. She is a expert grant writer. She's does grant writing for a living. She's been very successful in securing grants for a whole range of organisations and industries. We just wanted to bring Susan in today just because, often the only time you write a grant is when you've got one available to you. And so we wanted Susan to share with you all some of her top tips and golden rules for putting in great applications. Susan is going to give you a bit of relief from the PowerPoints. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Susan and then come back to you. So over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Linda. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Yep, awesome. Thank you. Great. So as Linda said, I'm a professional writer. Writing is my trade. I write a lot for business. I trained in journalism, and I think the beautiful thing about training in journalism is that you learn very early to lead with your strongest material, to really come out punching with strong material. So I was just thinking this morning, like, you know, when you read a news article, you can see it every day when you're reading, you know, the news or a press release. So what do writers do? They come out with their strongest stuff up front. So they talk about the action, they talk about the subject, they talk about the location, and they talk about the time frame. So today in the District Court of Port Adelaide, 5 men were charged with armed robbery. Right? So there's 4 key things right up front. You're coming out of the gate, you know where you stand, and the reader knows straight away what your project is, where it's going to be located, the park or the reserve that it's near to, and the 20k boundary or thereabouts, how much you're going for, the project, your business, and why this project is necessary, how it's going to meet a problem that the department needs solved, pretty much, when you think about it in those terms. But before we even get to sort of writing the grant, I want to just pedal right back, because when I work with a lot of people who are going for grants or going for, you know, loans or raising capital in their business, there's a couple of key things that have to happen that are pretty fundamental across the board. Now, this particular grant, it's been re-engineered, I think, to be pretty accessible. The upside is that that's great news for a lot of small businesses, and that's the majority of the tourism industry in South Australia and in Australia. The downside is that it means it's going to be very competitive. So you really need to step back and think, you know, is this worth my time actually going for this grant? Now, I'm speaking very, you know, objectively here, not for the department, but just as a small business owner myself. You know, your time is really important, and there are opportunity costs for everything that you do. So when I develop sort of frameworks for decision making in other businesses who go for a lot of grants or are trying to raise capital, the sort of things that I, you know, put to them, we run through a matrix of decision making, and those sorts of things are, am I eligible? You know, am I actually eligible for those 7 key areas that Chelsea outlined in her presentation? Does my idea actually fit, or am I trying to squeeze a, you know, like a round shape into a square hole, and I'm coming up against, you know, lots of question marks? I'm sort of scratching my head. That's the first thing. Ideally, you're aiming for more than 50% likelihood of winning that grant. If you're not in that top sort of 50 or even sort of top 20% of, yeah, this is really in the ballpark of what the department's looking for, chances are you should probably step off and rethink your idea and maybe come back in stronger next year, just because of the sheer amount of time it might take you to pull the documents together, step out of your business, and of course spend time doing things, the time that you can't be doing things that could also generate you that same amount of revenue. So you really need to trade, you know, look at what you're trading off in terms of your time. The other critical things is, you know, is the cost of the staff time to apply for the grant worth more than the grant itself? Do you have that co-contribution ready, that 20%? Is your business a high risk for the funder? So if you're new, if you're doing something really, really edgy and innovative, if you're not really known to the department, either of the departments or to TIC SA, chances are you're going to be a higher risk for the funder. And we're talking about government. So traditionally governments, you know, they're pretty risk adverse. They want to see that, you know, you're checking boxes, that you're making it as easy as possible, you know, for them to get the outcomes that they want. So my first sort of tip is just to make sure, is this really for you this year? And the great news is, of course, there's 4 more years of funding. So just maybe step back and think about how likely is it that you're actually going to get this grant. Pretty competitive. We're talking about, you know, lots of people going for sort of lots of small grants, you know, the risk factor, eligibility, just the basic stuff. My second point is really about a business plan. So this particular grant doesn't ask for a business plan explicitly, but generally whenever you're going to go for money or capital, it's really incumbent on you as the business owner to demonstrate viability of your concept. And if you haven't done that thinking, if you're not really comfortable in your bones about what you're doing and how it stacks up, and you know roughly what things cost and you've got experience, it's going to show through in your writing, because the writing will sort of not be confident. It sort of comes across if people are planning in a bit of a frenzy. So often simple statements and, one idea per sentence, and people who are really clear about what they're doing, they've got a track record, they're, established in business, talk confidently. So your writing needs to sort of sound confident. And a business plan will answer hundreds and hundreds of questions. A really good business plan, it was often quite short and succinct. It does all the heavy lifting for you, so it should talk about the risks. If you can confidently talk about risks and how you're going to overcome those risks of your idea, then you're in a much stronger position, I think. Then it's going to take you less time to explain your idea, explain who you are. And I think particularly if you're going for the second stream of this grant, the $50,000 stream, with a 20% contribution, that means that really your business is going to have to, hold a $60,000, $70,000 spend. And that's pretty high for a small business. Most businesses in South Australia, in tourism are sort of under the $1 million turnover. So, you're going to demonstrate, can your business effectively afford to spend $70,000 or, whatever the figure is, until you get reimbursed for that grant. That's a real cash flow issue for a lot of businesses. So just watch out for that one. So business plans should have finances, effectively in there, and a good cash flow that shows, how you're going to bankroll, your end of the deal. So that's the top two, the business plan. So if you're coming out roses up with a business plan, and you've got more than 50% chance of getting this grant, it's time to sort of go and have your meetings, get your forms in, as Chris has talked about, and Chelsea. Have your meetings with your regional tourism manager, digital meetings, keep it, brief and quick, and record the meetings that you're having so that you're sort of chocking the wheel as you go. So you've met with all of these people, you've met with the friends groups, you've written to the traditional owners, if you can get in touch with them. Sometimes it can be pretty hard to get a response from TOs. They do get pretty busy, and they are, often very volunteer organisations. They don't always expect an answer from traditional owners quickly, but you can rest assured that they'll be aware of it. So I think don't over-engage with people at this sort of early stages, because again, it's time, and there's no guarantee that you're going to actually win the money or win the grant. So you want to manage your expectations, of your stakeholders as well. So do all your engagement, and then review your concept again. So go back to the drawing board. Is this concept, is your idea still feasible? Is it stacking up? Is it stronger in many cases? And then you're pretty much ready to start writing. So the next tip, where am I? Here we go. So the pitch. So I sort of started with the pitch, sort of the 5 men in the Port Adelaide jail for armed robbery. So this is the strong entrance statement, something memorable. So back to your pitch. So don't ever assume, I think here, that the reader knows your business. Don't assume that they know the region that you're in or how that park works. You don't know who's reading this application. So really, it's up to you to paint the picture of your region and your business and the experience or the product that you're actually, using to activate the park, and do it in human terms. So don't overdo the numbers. The numbers are important, but don't overdo it. Tell it in short, easy to digest bursts, but lead with your strongest material. You'd be amazed at how many people bury quite far down in their grant, what is this thing actually for and how much do they want, right? 2 critical pieces of information. If you have that right up front, most readers, they remember probably 20% of what they read. When people write ministerials, all the important stuff's at the top, because, ministers are busy reading on the run. They've got to absorb information quickly and be able to articulate it quickly, in the chamber. So all your really good stuff has to go up front, and dot points are also a pretty good way to get key points through as well. So really that's the pitch, and remember that your funder again is risk adverse. So tell them how you're going to sort of overcome any risky elements of your project. That's pretty critical as well. You know, it's really about selling the benefits of your project, not, you know, how many, you know, CCs is your new bus, or, you know, how many batteries does this thing use, or how many amps does your e-bike have. Those things are probably not critical at this stage of the game. You know, it's how is your visitor going to enjoy the e-bike in the park that's 10 kilometres away, and how are you going to make sure that that bike is secure, and how many people are coming through your accommodation provider that are going to use that bike. You know, you need to really spell out those numbers. You've got something that the department doesn't have. You know, you've got access to markets, access to people, you've got a marketing function, probably through a booking function. So use those strengths to your advantage and demonstrate, you know, how you're going to deliver something that really the government departments are not in a position, it's not their remit to do those things. And just finally, I suppose, just some closing words on writing. I've covered a few of them already. So sell the benefits of your idea to the funder, not the features. It's a key one in marketing. You can keep it very simple. So one idea per sentence. It might feel a bit funny, like you're dumbing it down a bit, but believe me, when someone's busy and they've got a lot of information in their head and they're reading hundreds of grants, the simple, clear ideas really cut through, and it shows confidence. You know, it shows that, you know, you've done your work, you've done your thinking. So just try and keep it very simple sentence structures. Keep your language very simple. If you can say it in less words, do. No acronyms, no jargon. You know, be very clear about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it. And I think finally, it's always great to get someone who's not in tourism to read your application, possibly a teenager. You know, we love getting feedback from teenagers. Just, you know, get them to reflect back on you know, what this thing is actually for, what you're asking for. Is it making sense? Because a teenager will, you know, they'll tell you. So, you know, if it's nice and tight and clear, then you know that, you know, you've got a pretty good application. So less is definitely more, and quality definitely over quantity. That's my 5 tips. So just, I think there's a slide somewhere. Linda, is that right, with just the top tips there? Should I even go for this? Get a business plan. Get your meetings and sign-offs as soon as possible. Go for a nice strong pitch, you know, your strong stuff early, and then just some general business writing tips as well. So feel free to reach out if you need a hand, and thanks very much for the opportunity. Over to you, Linda.
Thanks so much, Susan. Hopefully everyone found those tips of Susan's really valuable, and obviously there's that slide there with just those quick references to what those tips are, so that you can go back to them. But what we're going to do now, I'm really pleased my desire to run a tight ship has played very well. We're running ahead of schedule, which is actually really, really great, because we do have quite a number of questions that have come through on the chat function. So what I'm going to do is, just so that we can make sure that we provide everyone with the information that they're seeking today, I'm just going to run through those questions and direct them to the right person to answer. Chris or Chelsea, you'll need to probably take yourself off of mute, so that if you're the best person to respond, or Susan if it's a grant writing question. But again, if we don't get through them all, we'll follow up with these questions as a document, so for post this session. So the first question is a roadway or an access track considered infrastructure? So Chris, this might be one for you, because I'm assuming we're potentially talking about, oh well, actually Chelsea, it could be off park as well. So who wants to answer?
I can probably answer from the location around the park. So yes, this would be considered infrastructure if it's not located in the national park, but it's always key to remember, how is the roadway and the access track going to encourage visitation or activate the national park? So if it's a standalone infrastructure, is there going to be an increase in visitation? Is it easier for them to get to the park? That kind of thing. So it is eligible, but yeah, just remember that point. Chris, have you got any further to add?
And just from a national parks point of view, if you wanted to construct a trail or an access path in a national park, you wouldn't be eligible for this fund because it would require obviously a lease or a license, and it couldn't be activated in the time frame. Obviously, some of these grants have to be delivered in 6 months or 12 months. Obviously, an access track may take a lot longer than that. So just quick early no here for access tracks.
Okay, the next question is just someone's curious about the definition of national parks. And Chris, I know that this is your something that you're very knowledgeable and passionate about. The person asking the question says that the area they're considering is a state heritage area and a South Australian geological monument. Is this eligible?
So activating those state heritage areas isn't eligible. Because it's not under one of those 3 listed pieces of legislation. But if that heritage area was within 20 kilometres of a national park and there was an element of activity into the national park, then it could be eligible.
Thank you. So our next question, can we apply, and Chelsea, this one's definitely you, can we apply each year for the funds or is it a once-off application?
You can apply each year for the fund. So even if you are successful this year, you can reapply next year, but obviously it needs to be a different project that you're applying for.
Okay, great. So if you've applied and you've received funding for a project, you can't receive additional funding for that project in 30 years.
Yeah, so it's a totally different idea for next year, not a problem. Yeah.
Are mobile food businesses eligible?
I can take that one. Yes, they are eligible, but once again, you need to note how it activates and encourages visitation. So if it's a food truck that's parked next to a park and you're saying by having that you're providing services that aren't otherwise provided near the park, that is definitely eligible.
Right. Okay, so coming back to sort of again about applying multiple. So if you've been successful for one project, you cannot apply for further funding for that particular project. If you are unsuccessful in year one, can you reapply?
Yes, if your project or your application is deemed eligible, so you've met all the eligibility criteria and unfortunately you're unsuccessful in round 1, you can reapply for that same idea in round 2 because obviously it is a competitive fund, so it will be assessed competitively.
And if you've got a new project, if you receive funding for one project and you've got a new idea for it or another project in a later year, you can apply again.
Yes, yeah. Right, just has to be a different project. Like if you're successful, yes, correct.
Okay, so we've got one here about being in a nature reserve adjacent to a national park. Does the 20-kilometre requirement mean that visitors to the reserve also need to be encouraged to visit the park for an application? For example, upgraded accommodation on this particular reserve to be considered. So if you're applying for a project on land that's not in the park, do you need to have be directing more visitors or guests into the park?
Yes, that is a requirement of the fund, yes.
Is off-grid mobile accommodation eligible?
Yes, it would be, but once again, you need to have all necessary approvals to park your mobile accommodation or whatever land you are parking it on.
And Chris, did you want to answer this one? Because I know that this is probably one that parks get asked a lot because it's not seen necessarily, if you can take it on and move it off, it's not a sort of an infrastructure build that's not eligible, but yeah, is off-grid mobile accommodation in parks eligible?
Yeah, it depends. It depends. So if you are requiring a lease, it's not eligible. If you are applying for a license, i.e. non-exclusive, just like a mobile food truck, but with accommodation, it could be eligible.
Right.
Again, it will depend on the location and park management plan. Obviously, you would want to do that where you have a fairly developed visitor precinct. You wouldn't want to put that in the middle of a wilderness area. So, yeah, again, it comes back fit for the setting. Have a think about the park, have a think about the management plan, and yeah, it could be eligible if it's mobile.
Is the 50-metre reserve along the River Murray considered a national park? So Chris, can you provide advice on this? Because obviously there's a Crown land.
Correct. So So the 50 metres coastal strip is declared Crown lands. That's under the Crown Land Management Act, which isn't eligible. However, if it's within 20 kilometres of the River Murray National Park, for example, it would meet the criteria, and as long as people are using the Murray River National Park, then it would meet the criteria.
Right. And so I guess, because, you know, some people would be familiar, and Chelsea, you we might want to respond to you too, is that obviously some people would be familiar with the previous sort of nature tourism grant funding, which was the larger nature-based tourism fund, as well as there was some small nature tourism grants allocated for the funding program last year. And you could apply for land that was under the care and control of DW or national parks or reservoirs or Crown land. So we're not actually talking about the same land eligibility for this grant program, are we? It's a little bit different and it's a little bit more specific around national parks.
And what I'm hearing a lot here is people are coming in with their project idea, which is natural, and then they're saying, "Is this eligible? Is this eligible?" But I think, you know, to some of Chelsea's point, it's about how you're going to activate parks. So wherever the thing is that you're going to do, even if it's a storytelling component or, you know, interpretation plans, it's quite, you know, it's a very broad grant, this one. It's up to the business to demonstrate how this is going to bring more foot traffic into the park and, you know, get the permission sorted out before you make those claims. But that's the stuff that, you know, parks are not going to be able to look into your business and see what you've got and what your ideas are, that it's going to actually bring people from, you know, your Airbnb in Corn to, the Heiston Trail that goes through multiple different, you know, land tenures. It's not so much the land tenure. I think that is the key issue here. It's about the activation and extending the seasons and those kinds of economic development activities that occur, you know, across South Australia. That's the goal, I suppose, is going to make you stand out, not just the physical capital thing.
Jesse or Chris, did you have anything to add to that? No. Excellent. I'm going to move on to the next question. Is the fund directed at private providers running an activity, and here we go, in a national park, or encouraging visitors to parks through our services in or adjacent to parks? So if I've got the B&B, do I actually have to physically run the activity that takes people into parks, or is directing them to a provider that does enough? Does that satisfy the criteria enough?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of kind of up to how you're demonstrating to the panel, because it is a competitive fund. So they're going to look at ones that are directly impacting and encouraging visitation to the park, and compared to applications that might not have that strong enough kind of case of encouraging visitation. So it is directed to both those activities. So if, for example, if you have a service or accommodation adjacent to a park where there is minimal accommodation in the area, that could be weighted higher than another one which there's a lot of accommodation around a national park. So yeah, it's a competitive fund at the end of the day, so it is how you demonstrate that activation.
Yeah. Right. And so here's one that might obviously be you've no doubt considered this, Chelsea, and probably relevant to some of the further out areas of the further you get out from Adelaide, the more relevant this will be. So someone's got a project for a site which is a major stopping off point for people heading out to the Kulin Ranges National Park. The site, however, looks to be about 30 kilometres from the boundary of the park. So how rigorous is that 20-kilometre limit for remote locations such as the Eyre Peninsula, such as the Flinders Ranges and outback regions?
Look, we do understand those areas are very, the 20 kilometres doesn't really go far in a lot of those remote areas. So this is actually mentioned in the guidelines as well, that remote locations will be considered on a case-by-case basis. So that is definitely something you can apply for, and there's some notes on just explaining what park you're activating, so you can't kind of apply for one without noting what park you're activating. But yes, it definitely would be considered for that remote location, so encourage you to apply if it's the 30 kilometres.
Great. And this is obviously where people can reach out to you for that advice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you apply for more than one? Can you apply for more than one distinct project? Sorry. So can I've got 3 projects. Can I put in multiple applications?
You cannot apply with multiple applications. There's only one application per business per financial year. However, you could apply, say, for example, if you had 3 national parks you were operating into and you're buying bikes for 3 different parks and running 3 different tours and putting them in together for one application. You can only apply for that maximum of $50,000 grant amount. But yeah, it is worth noting it is competitive, and if you are kind of putting a lot of different aspects of different projects, it might be a little bit hard for the panel to determine the, I guess, the outcomes of those multiple projects against one really kind of concise and compelling application. So that would be one where you could kind of think about maybe next year and put all your eggs into one basket this year and then apply next year for a different project. But having said that, it is possible.
Can you start implementing project or submitted initiatives before you receive your approval in December?
No, you cannot commence your project prior to receiving an approval letter if you are successful. And projects, that is worth also noting that projects that commenced are ineligible.
A new project not yet started won't be starting until the funding approval has been received.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, this is one for you. It's about parts in principle support. So someone's previously had issue with compliance regarding their business being a hire based, and the business pass didn't transfer to hirers. So this might be one. This might be a little bit more specific. We might maybe follow up with you afterwards, Chris, on this one. Yeah, so that's about a process, I guess, for getting approval. So, yeah, so if the person who's asked that question, if it's okay, we might take that one offline. So that
yeah, happy to take that one offline so I can unpack that a bit further. I think it's an interesting one just to understand that issue a bit further.
Great, fantastic. Are you required to nominate the specific amount of grant funding being sought? So recognising that there's a total fund pool of $500,000 for this financial year, and that applications will be considered and approved on merit as well as meeting the criteria. Is it okay that the total pool would be divided by the number of meritorious applications, meaning that while your application might be successful, I think it's effectively, I think the question is that if I apply for $50,000, is it likely that if there's, you know, many $50,000 successful applications that I will actually just get, I won't get the full amount that I've requested, I'll just get part funding?
I can answer that one. Yes, you are required to nominate the specific amount of grant funding sought. Generally, the panel will look at your overall project costs substantiated by your quotations, and that is, if you are successful, you will be kind of rewarded that amount. It won't be something where they get a big pool and divide it by how many they think should receive funding. So it is a competitive fund, and you'll be assessed competitively. So the ones that are with the higher score will be the ones awarded funding. I think, has that answered?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, for a lot of people, and I myself, you know, for various previous lives applying for grants, and, you know, there's the moment of joy when you get told that you've been successful for a grant, but you've been allocated half of what you've been requested, and you have that moment of, oh, no, what do I do? Do I reject the grant or do I push forward with the project? And I think this probably comes back to some of Susan's points too about really having a really clear and strong understanding for your project, and being really clear around what you can financially carry as well as a business to make your project successful.
Yep.
So this one's already been asked about multiple grant or multiple sort of project ideas within the one application, and you're saying, Chelsea, that yes, it can be done. but to beware, you know, it does potentially dilute the pitch that Susan
Yeah.
is about as being really critical, and you know, you maybe not putting your best ideas forward if you're putting too many forward.
Yeah, to give you also an example, the online form, you'll have to include 3 new projects in the same character limit as one project. So that also kind of gives you an idea of it'd be kind of diluting that information. But having said that, if the 3 projects are kind of all linked and it's a part of a kind of overall, say 3 different bike tours, it may be something that you can link strategically.
And I guess too, the reassurance here is that, you know, this is what's I think really great about this grant program is that there's that reassurance that there are further years of it. You know, there's not the panic of, oh my God, there's a grant program, we have to go for it now, otherwise we'll never have this opportunity to get this funding again.
Yeah.
Chris, this one's definitely up your alley. Are marine parks included?
Yes, they are, and 20 kilometres within a marine park as well. So within 20 kilometres a marine park is eligible. Obviously, we want people to activate our marine parks. We've got some fantastic marine experiences already out there, but yeah, very much encourage people to think about marine parks, not just national parks.
Excellent. And I think that probably, you know, opens up a real opportunity in South Australia when people start to think about parks being water-based, not just land-based, and, you know, our real strengths and our assets as a state around marine experiences. I think there's a lot of potential there for people to tap into for this grant program. Okay, another one for you, Chris. Bike riding's been mentioned quite a bit as part of today's discussion. What about things like horse riding within parks? Is there a comfort level around those types of activities?
Yeah, it's a good question, and some of our parks management plans don't provide for horse riding. So again, it will come back to the specific park and whether the management plan actually provides for horse riding. We do have some shared use trails in some of our parks and also single use trails for walking and mountain biking and horse riding. So yeah, it really will come back to the specific park and the park management plan. So yeah, I'd encourage, if you're interested in horse riding in parks, not marine parks, obviously, reach out to us at that email with your specific query and we'll get some information for you if you can't find yourself on the web.
Right. And I think, you know, this is a really great reference. And I think it's probably a space that people don't think to sort of go to when they're thinking about what they can do in a park, is to actually look for the park management plan for that particular park, because that does provide that level of understanding around what you can what you can do within a park or what the opportunities might do. And I think, you know, I always think about it, I always compare it to, you know, your park management plans, much like your your planning sort of code for your town. And often when you think about, I want to do a particular activity, it's really good to go to find out, you know, what is allowable within a certain location. So those documents exist and they're really great resources. Kelsey, we're now talking, again, you know, you've talked a lot about the scope here, that it's not just about hard things, but it also is about potentially digital things. So are online booking systems eligible?
Yes, they are eligible, stated in the guidelines as well. However, once again, you'll need to demonstrate how that by activating an online booking system, how you're encouraging visitation to the park. So if it's a tour you're already operating and you didn't have an online booking system, you could demonstrate an increase in visitation or something like that. So,
right. If my business has been established for less than 12 months, but would be 12 months old at the start of the project. So I started my business in January this year. So I'm only 8 months old, but I will be, you know, 12 months old in January next year when I've hopefully got my funding and I'm ready to go. Am I still eligible?
Unfortunately, no. So you do need to have an ABN that's been operating for 12 months when you apply for the grant funding. So this would be a case I would recommend that you would wait that year and apply for the funding next year, when in that case you would become eligible.
And again, another great reassurance, I think, that this is, don't panic about this being a one only opportunity to access funding, and that 12 months goes actually really quickly. And sometimes I think, you know, I'm sure Susan would test to this, but allowing yourself that little bit of extra time to get yourself ready to apply.
Yeah, and it's also about profile. I mean, as human beings, it's about raising profile. So if you're not known, if you're not spending time in front of your destination, your regional manager, or picking up the phone and connecting with Miranda and SATC and the team in the desk, Nick's team, you know, it's about getting known and engaging with you know, South Australia is a very small state. It's a very networked state. So if you've got, you know, some time, let people know that this business is on the radar, and then you're going to just be in the public consciousness and the awareness of the reader when they actually come. You have to do a lot less heavy lifting in your grant application, explaining who you are, and you know, whereas, you know, it's the power of the brand, isn't it? Someone who's been around for a long time, a brand that we all know, you don't have to explain as much who they are. So they carry a lot of weight. So it's just you're still eligible, yes, tick, but there is another level here in terms of your success, I suppose, the degrees of success, where familiarity, you know, it carries weight. So work on your profile. If you're a new business, you've got, you know, probably a couple of years really to build a brand. It takes a couple of years to get that going, and then, you know, you have to do a lot less writing around what you want to do and how it's going to work. And you'll also have 12 months of experience to say, this is what our first year was like, and now we really know the market. So we'll just come out a lot stronger.
Here's a guideline specific question, Chelsea. 3.2, gateway signage, entrance signs and other outdoor advertising signage isn't eligible for funding. What about, and this is, you know, dear to my heart, dear to many people's hearts at DEW as well, what about interpretive signage?
Yes.
Sorry.
I jumped the gun there. Yes, that would be an eligible project. Yeah, once again, as long as it's not that fixed signage that requires a lease on national park, but if it's outside the land and it is outside national parks and it is encouraging that visitation, yes, that would be eligible.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next thing, so long as we're not talking about interpretation signage within national parks, of course.
So maybe just to clarify that, obviously, if you were proposing to do some sort of interpretive signage or trail or tour, make sure that's very clear in your application for in-principle support, because it may be that you don't get the in-principle support for that activity if it's not appropriate for the park. So just, you know, be very clear about what it is you're proposing to do inside the park when it comes to fixed assets being signage, because we wouldn't want to mislead you before you apply. So yeah,
and obviously Chris said probably want to be, you know, if someone's putting potentially some sort of fixed interpretation within a park environment, that there's potentially a requirement to be much more have much stronger involvement from parks in what the actual content of that interpretation is.
Yeah, I think it's a challenging one, that one. I suspect it's probably most likely going to be ineligible, just because the amount of work that would be required to authorise that, particularly if there's any sort of, you know, Aboriginal component or cultural component to it, or geological component. My suggestion would be probably to focus on signage off park to support, and then just taking the verbal or the audio tours in the park.
Yeah, right. Okay, so and obviously, you know, Susan's talked about presenting, you know, your project as a way of resolving an issue for parks. And I guess and I think Chris is, and Chelsea too, you know, I think this comes back to the core. This question comes back to the core of what this program is about. And the question is, what is the problem parks is hoping to solve through the grant? But I think what is ultimately, what is the ambition of this grant program when it comes to funding experiences that activate parks? I'm not
Do you want me Chelsea, do you want me to answer? I mean, I can.
Yes, so jumping back to the intent of the fund, so that is to support those tourism projects which create those nature-based experiences. So it is about activating assets in the state that are, I guess, after COVID, everybody's really kind of treasuring these natural assets. So it's encouraging that education and people to get out there and see a bit more of their state and kind of activating them more. So I'm not sure if you've got anything more to add to that, Chris.
Yeah, maybe just from a national parks perspective, I think it's really about recognising that we've got about 120 tour operators in our national parks. We'd love to increase the number of tour operators who use parks. Our international and domestic visitors love nature and wildlife, and some of the best experiences are in parks. And also what we hear from a lot of our visitors is the level of interpretation around the park. So we'd really like, it's not often the fund comes along that's prepared to fund improvements in interpretation, in marketing, in product development, in Aboriginal content. I really would encourage operators to think about taking their interpretation to the next level in the park, because that just is going to give a much richer visitor experience for people who are coming through. Or even just think about a different market, you know, whether it be an inclusive accessibility market, people who perhaps don't visit parks traditionally, whether you can actually just broaden your product offering to provide disability support or tours for autistic children, or just think about how you might use this money to actually build a much more diverse and inclusive product.
Susan, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Chris has really nailed it. I guess just as I'm sitting back and thinking about, the Department for Environment and Water, it's only really in recent times, in many ways, they've been involved in tourism conversations in the last recent governments and in South Australia. And I think, their remit really is conservation, and, they're flat out putting resources in land management, feral management, pest management, engaging with stakeholders. There's a lot going on in parks behind the scenes in tourism. So other than tourism. So as tourism operators, we can often look at parks and just think, well, why isn't all this stuff happening? But at the same time, I think that the problem that I think that, the parks are trying to solve here is they don't necessarily have access to the same markets that we do as tourism operators. They don't have access to the trade and the distribution. They're not really at the coalface necessarily. Some of course, some are. I think Chris and Chelsea, you probably would be. But, on park in regions, when you talk to the rangers, they're flat out just doing day-to-day park land management. So that's the reality, I guess, in region. So when this fund comes along, what parks wants is they want to tap into industry's creativity and your innovation to solve problems. And you can see from your customers, what are your customers saying? What are your agents saying that they want more of? Where's the evidence? Get your testimonials in your grant application. We surveyed, and 20% of our visitors said they would have loved to have done a nighttime tour in the park. So put your evidence, even if it's anecdotal, like it's better than nothing. So put it in there because it just all goes into the pot of what's possible, and the next grant might be, tailored towards, more different, kinds of experiences. So yeah, I think if that helps, think about what does the funder really want? What's the thing they can't do that you can do, which is what makes you so great.
Great, Susan. We're nearly at the end of our questions, which is great, but we've just got a couple more to go. Sturt Gorge Recreation Park, which is behind Flinders University. Chris, is that eligible? Thumbs up.
Lovely park, beautiful, accessible, dog friendly. So yeah, let's think creatively about activating that space. New train line drops you at the front door, pretty much. So yeah, great.
Okay, Chelsea, this is one a little bit about the 12 months of operation. What happens if a business has been running for 40 years and you're the new owner with a new ABN?
Yes, so you will need to have an ABN operating for 12 months to apply for the funds. So whatever the ABN you put in your application as the applicant, that becomes your grant fund, so everything under the deed, so all your obligations and things will be under the ABN. So yeah, to cut the answer short, yes, unfortunately, if you're operating for 40 years under an old ABN and you've got a new one, it'll be that waiting till next year to be eligible to have that 12-month duration.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Well, that sounds like that's a bit of a bummer if you're 40-year-old business, but yeah, I think having that clarity around it's that ABN 12-month criteria, which is really important. But no doubt, Chelsea, you're happy to obviously talk to people through these complexities that arise. Now, that is a lot of questions, and I'm sure people do have some more questions, but I'm just conscious of time because, you know, we have had you all sitting in front of your computers for nearly an hour and a half now, and we've gone through a lot. So if there are any follow-up questions, what we might do is we might sort of just compile this. Obviously, you can go back and have a look at this recording. But I can talk to Chelsea. We might just pull together a bit of an FAQs, or Chelsea, you might already have one that we can just share back with the group after today's session. But I might just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my screen.
Sorry, there's just one more question about nighttime activities.
Yeah, oh, yes. If you want to.
Projections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Obviously, we're always looking to kind of diversify into that night and also off-season. Events and festivals are standalone and not eligible to apply for the funding. But if it was an ongoing, maybe if you could demonstrate that it was a monthly thing or that it's over the course of the year and can demonstrate the benefit to the park, that is something the panel may consider.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much, Chelsea, for picking up that last one for me. So what I'm going to do is just sort of go back over sort of that critical information. As I said, it's been a lot for you to sort of digest today, but I think hopefully this session's really answered some of those sort of top line questions that you've had, and also provided you with the opportunity to use Susan's advice to really reflect on whether or not you're actually ultimately really ready to apply for this grants program this year, or whether or not it's about seeing how this year goes, getting all of those facts in a row, and then going in with a really strong application next year. But if you are ready to go, your shovel ready, as Chelsea has said, is kind of the critical element of having success in this year's funding round, is that your applications open very, very shortly. I know September feels like it's months away, you know, but we're very nearly there. We've got one week of pretty much of winter left to go, and then we're back into beautiful spring. And so the 5th of September is when the grant applications open, and then it's great that there's quite a long sort of application period, with them closing on the 21st of October. So you know, and I think the reassurance around that is, and again coming back to Susan's key points, don't panic. Make sure you've got your information correct and you've got all of the detail, so that you're putting in a good application as opposed to just putting in any application. Don't forget though that, you know, starting early is really, really critical on this, particularly when it comes to getting approval from other landowners, and those applications for in-principle support from national parks are now open. And you know, I can assure you that I can't probably highlight strongly enough from my own experience that the sooner you start engaging with national parks, the far better the outcome. I think just bear in mind that we've had over 170 registrations for today's seminar, session. So we know that there's lots of interest out there. So we know that national parks are going to be really busy. So make sure you're not leaving things to the last minute to make sure that you get the best outcome for your project. For further information, you know, the web page or the page on the tourism website, it's tourism.sa.gov.au, and you click on the support tab right up at the top there. I've highlighted it in green, and that will take you through to all of the information for this grants program, including that online in-principle support request form. So all of that's there, along with all of Chelsea's contact details and all the other contact details that you'll need for for moving ahead with your grant application. So I think, Chelsea, Chris, did you have any sort of final words as we sign off from today's session?
Nothing. Yeah, nothing from me. So all good.
Great, excellent. Well, I'm going to thank everyone. I'm going to thank you all for joining us. I'm going to thank Susan for joining us as well and for sharing all of that information. I think she's a really great resource that we've got available to industry in South Australia, as well as, reach out to the teenagers, as Susan said, but also to reach out to other people that in your world who have had experience in writing grants before, or who can provide you with really honest feedback. Thank you, Chris and his team for joining us, and thank you, Chelsea, Nick, Miranda, your team too, for actually reaching out to us too, and joining with, inviting TIC-SA to support you in rolling this grants program out. It's fundamentally important, these types of activities for our industry, and yeah, we're really pleased to be able to be a part of it. So thank you everyone. Stay tuned to hear from us. Bye.